So we have been spending now the last several weeks talking a lot about prayer, and that is something that has been, I think, both good and important for us as a church and as a community of faith. But it has also been really good for me also to spend time not just putting those pieces together, but spending that time in prayer. And I think that's an important place for us to start as we begin to take a look at our next steps as a church and who we are and the work that we are doing, because we are beginning to have a bigger discussion. And prayer is a fundamental piece of who we are and who we are supposed to be as Christians. So I also want to say that in the next couple of weeks, watch as I'm going to put some of those pieces of all those things together. I'll have it together in a booklet. Some of the handouts we've had, also a list of resources that includes books and phone apps and that sort of thing that can help us to deepen our prayer lives and spend that time in prayer with God in a new, and sometimes in a new way, but I also hope in a better way. But there was a method in my madness in starting with prayer and going in this direction, because today is the day that I was wanting to get to, that I was wanting to kind of build up to, but I knew I couldn't just start with this. We needed to spend some time in prayer first. And so that's why, as over the course of this last month or so, that we have been starting our worship time with this breakthrough prayer. And that is, we've been not just starting that, but we've been starting meetings and our prayer group and other things with this same prayer that ask God to show us something important. And so our question for today starts with this: what does it mean to be the spiritual heart, first really of anything? Much less, what does it mean to be the spiritual heart of our community? And then a second part of that is, why is that important now? Why is that something for us? Why is that important for us to be focusing on that and talking about that now? Now, I've been circling around the edges of these questions for a long time now. Even before we got up here, I was kind of circling around this. I didn't know the words to the question yet. I just knew there was something there, but I couldn't put it quite into words yet. And I wasn't sure when, and I wasn't sure where I'd be when I'd finally get the chance to ask this question. And I say all that because I've watched us, and that's the royal us there, kind of like the royal we. That's all of us, whether we're talking about church, community, nation, people of faith, people outside of the faith. I've been watching us as we have tried to find that spiritual heart for a very long time. Somewhere along the way, we lost track of it. And it wasn't that we just woke up one day and it was just kind of gone. It was kind of this gradual disappearance as other things began to kind of take other shape around us, and until we kind of get to a point where we're like, wait, where did that go? We've been trying for a long time now to fill that missing place with lots of other things. When I say a long time, like I can even, in looking back on it, I can see where some of those pieces started to kind of come together, even way back when I was in high school. That was a lot longer now than I really want to think about, but back even then, and because I remember when I was in high school, I didn't have these thoughts then, because when you're in high school, you are rightfully, in a lot of ways, pretty self-absorbed in your own things, the things that are going on. You aren't paying a whole lot of attention to the rest of the world around us. But back when I was in high school, I can remember at some point along the way, all of the adults around us, like my parents' generation, had this big "oh no" moment, where they were worried about who their kids were growing up to be. Because we were growing up watching MTV, being at home by ourselves, possibly getting into all sorts of trouble. I was born in 1980, and so I was part of that latchkey kid generation, except I never had a key that I wore because I lived out in a small town. We never locked our doors, so it wasn't a big deal whether or not we had a key with us. But you know what those kids were. We get home after school, and we might be home for 2 or 3 hours by ourselves, watching TV, doing whatever before our folks got home. And so there was this thought then that came out that said, well, we've got to do something to keep the kids occupied. And so we see kind of this one circle begin to kind of start in a part of this. I don't know if that was the first one, but it was just kind of one of the ones that I began to recognize. But also back then, when I was in high school, college, that age, we saw the start of the information age. And we started new circles of things revolving around like things like chat rooms and things that later we come to call social media, like MySpace, Friendster, Napster. I mean, it was a big deal when I was in college downloading music on Napster until the network guys said, no, y'all can't do that anymore, and we know who's doing this. And we're like, oh, well, okay. All those things that came out, or we used AOL Instant Messenger. Anyone remember that one? I see a few folks going, yeah, we remember that. That was a long time ago now, using that. And so there's another kind of set of circles as technology came in. And then we see like the big development of every cable channel you could ever want. I remember when Cartoon Network came out, I'm like, I've got a whole channel devoted to cartoons. Life is good now. But you had that, you had all the ESPNs come out, so now you had sports packages for everything, which I'm sure Scott is probably really excited about, to have all the sports that he can ever watch. And all of these things are all different circles of things that kind of began to come out, and they're fun and they're good, but as time goes on, they keep getting a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger. And as they get bigger, the weight of those things, they want to try and move into other places that maybe they weren't ever like a really good fit for. And so as time goes on, we become more hyper-focused on those things. And so now we see kids get really involved in sports and in other activities, to the point that they are almost so more involved in those things than they are in school or family or other things. If you have a niche hobby, there's a whole entire community of folks out there that will be devoted to that same sort of thing. And this is where I told a friend of mine earlier this week, I'm like, I'm going to throw you under the bus at this point. He might be watching it now because I'm recording this for later on. So hi, Joel. This is, if you go onto YouTube and you go search for the La Plata Rail Cam, it is literally a camera set up at the La Plata train station that just watches the tracks 24/7. If you go on there, you will find anywhere between 300 and 600 people that are logged in watching that camera at any given point in time. It's a niche community, but there are a lot of folks that are doing that. I have another friend who is really big into fountain pens. And like they developed huge communities of people that like to talk about pens and nibs and inks and papers and all that sort of stuff that I'm like, I kind of like to use fountain pens sometimes, but I get lost after a while between all of this stuff that they're doing. In the last year, we've seen a big increase in another niche sort of community, and Emily and I have been watching on TV. I got her into this, so this one's my fault. But a number of years ago, I started watching this YouTube channel where this family would put new videos up once a week on Sunday evenings, and they decided to go full-time RVing. They figured out how to make it happen, how they could do that, and so every week you see where they are or what they're doing or all the RV stuff, and I've watched over time as they have developed a community of folks that support them, and they in turn help support others as they are learning and getting out and giving tips and tricks and hints, but also going to all these fun places and telling folks kind of how to navigate all the different parts of that. And you see this huge community of folks that have developed around that. And if you've seen anything in the last year, you know that RV, if you want to try and buy an RV right now, good luck. Because you can't find them, because everybody's like, oh, well, I can't go stay in a hotel, but I can pull an RV. Doesn't matter if I've got a Prius, I'm going to pull a fifth wheel behind me. We're going to make it down the road, by golly. We're going to get there. But there's this new community of folks that has developed. But all of these groups, when they reach kind of a certain point, they begin to try and do more. They begin to try and find meaning in places that maybe they were never really designed for. They try to find the heart of something that maybe they aren't equipped to do. Some are more successful at this than others, but none of them are really set up to provide the sort of ontological meaning. They don't tell us why we exist. Baseball doesn't give us the meaning of life, no matter how many Yogi Berra quotes that you can have and that you can bring to bear in any situation. And it doesn't matter how much Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, Great British Baking Show, or Somebody Feed Phil that I binge watch, I'm not going to find the meaning of life there. Tasty recipes that I want to try? Absolutely. But I'm not going to find the meaning of life in those places. It's not my heart. In so many ways, though, all of these things have been trying to fill a gap. A gap that the church used to fill. Even back in the day, for folks who weren't really religious or weren't even all that faithful, the church used to be that heart. Even if they weren't faithful, folks knew that the church was there, and that was their role in the community. And we can trace back, and we can kind of see where some of this has begun to happen. Early in the year, Gallup released the results of an annual survey it does, which asks a lot of questions on a lot of different things. One of the big subsections of that has to do with religion. And one of the big questions they ask every year, and have been for a very long time, is this: how important would you say religion is in your own life? And the responses that you can give is very important, fairly important, or not very important. And you can see kind of where the numbers have been trending on there for folks that say religion is very important in their lives. Now, my own background in training says that, well, you're just asking very important. You can't just include the folks that are at the one extreme end of this, and you've got to include the fairly important also in all of that. Except that you can see, in context, you can see where those numbers have been declining. Back in 2003, it was 61%. In 1992, it was 58%. And in 2020 was the second of 2 years in a row where that number came in under 50%. We can kind of see where that decline has been coming. But the thing about this is we've known this. We've known this for a long time because we've seen this in our own communities of faith. I've seen this in every community I've been in as a pastor, where attendance isn't what it was 30 years ago, where the average age kind of keeps creeping up a little bit every year, no matter the fact that we have a bumper crop of babies with us this morning, which is fun to see and hear them. And we know that what it means to regularly attend church has been shifting over the course of the last 20 years. It used to be you'd be in church at least once a week because you had lots of opportunities. You'd have Monday morning, or Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday afternoon, or Wednesday evening. You might have Bible studies that happened. There were lots of opportunities to be in church, but then it became, well, just once a week, once every other week, once a month. And especially after this past year, we don't have any idea what it means to be in regular attendance at church. And folks from outside of the church, unless they're part of a church, don't really know what to do with one anymore. For many folks, it's the place where you go to get married. It might be the place where you go to get buried. But a lot of times it's the place you go if you need help. And not just if you need help with food or utilities or rent or stuff like that, but maybe when you need a donation for something or want to share a flyer or an announcement. It's like we go on the list with, Rotary Club, Lions Club, Eagles, all of the other folks that we've kind of found ourselves in that place. Sometimes, though, in a time of crisis, others will remember the church and they'll know that it's supposed to be a place where you go to find help, but they aren't sure what that exactly means. And inside of the church, we aren't really sure what that means either anymore. Before we go any farther, let me be clear on something here. This isn't a critique or a condemnation of anything right now. This is just a statement of the way that things are. This would be, other folks, they would look at this and this would be a big prophetic sermon that they would be giving, and then they would move into why everyone should be doing things in this way or that way, and saying it's all these other people's fault, whatever it is. But you all have heard me say a lot of times, the definition I use for prophecy, and that's what I think applies here, is that good prophecy explains the world around us with the intent to teach a lesson. And so that's what we've been doing in this first part. This is just kind of explaining where we are, good, bad, or otherwise. This is kind of the state of the world that we find ourselves in right now. So now it's time to hit the second part of that, though. What's the lesson in here? Go back to our scripture reading for this morning. This is another part of the Sermon on the Mount. Remember a couple of weeks ago we were in Matthew chapter 6 and we were taking a look at the Lord's Prayer and what that means, and kind of using that as a way to help deepen and strengthen our prayer lives. Well, this morning we're in a chapter before that. We're in chapter 5, and we get, in verse 14, we get this. Jesus says, "You are the light of the world. A city on top of the hill can't be hidden." Now, this isn't the light that Jesus is talking about here isn't a light that shines down on others so that their mistakes can be seen, so that we can figure out who has done what wrong. This isn't like a divine interrogation room where you've got that one light bulb on there that sits over the person who's being questioned. Not that kind of light. One of the things that hurts the church is that actually is what a lot of people think the church does when it talks about shining that kind of light. That's what they think, and for a lot of folks, that's the experience that they've actually had of church. And we'll look at it and say, that's not at all what we intend, and it's not what we intend, but that's been their experience. And so we have to know that also is a part of the context that we are in. And so it remains that we have to remember another part of this passage. We go to the second part of verse 16 that says this: so they can see the good things you do and praise your Father in heaven. The light that is shining isn't for us just to be seen, but it is for through us the goodness of the world that God has created for it to be seen. And then in times of trouble and in times of celebration, both us and others around us know where we can go so that both of those things can be lifted up in the best possible way. So let's put these things together. I'm going to take a look at this image. This is a very, very rough draft of an image. It still needs a little bit of work, but it's a good start. If you are listening on the radio right now, go to our Facebook page and you can see this. If you're driving especially, please wait until the airplane comes to a full and complete stop before you try and look at this. But this is kind of how I'm conceptualizing a lot of this conversation that we are going to begin to have. Jesus tells us that we are to be the light of the world, the city on the hill. And that puts us in a very visual place, a place to be seen, because that's where the light is shining from. And that's okay. But it does come with some of its own challenges because we have to be careful. This doesn't mean that we are living a life to show off, because remember, elsewhere in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus literally says, don't be a show-off like these other folks over here. Several times he makes that comment about folks, say, don't do that, go and be different. But it does mean that we have to ask ourselves some questions. Are we living the kind of life, whether on our own or as a church, as a community of faith, that we live in that place? And that's why we've spent so much time the last few weeks talking about prayer. Because doing this kind of work shouldn't be hard, but it does mean we need the right tools to do it. And the tools we start with are prayer. So remember what we want and where we need to be as the spiritual heart of our community. That place starts with prayer and with talking to God. And then we look at the other strengths that we have, and we have a lot of strengths as a church and as a community of faith. We look at the other strengths like love, grace, connection, belonging, life, energy, leadership. We have lots of things that we can use that are a part of this. We are already in a good place to start. But the challenge for us now is to take those things wrapped in prayer and be in conversation with God about how we can best use them for this work that He is setting us on. And we are working, even we aren't sure quite what the end result is going to be, we've already started working on this. I'm excited for what we are doing back in the backyard over here. We've got a group of folks that are working on a community garden. We have a new play sets ordered. We've already had ideas come up about things that we can do that are an invitation to both bring folks in and join with us in fun and activities and in ministry, but also it's an invitation that where others who may have other expertise and things that we don't have, where they can show us and we can learn from them. For now, though, this is a big time of year. Graduation is coming up. The end of the school year is coming up, and it has been a school year for the books, the craziness, and all the stuff that's been coming with that. It is all coming, winding down. Summer is beginning. We're looking towards the end of policies that were put in place to help with our health and safety. And so what I need from you, and what we need as a church, as a people of faith, is to spend time in prayer, understanding what God wants from us, the vision that God has for us as a people in this time and in this place. To reflect on what it means to be the spiritual heart of our community, or other imagery that might work to help that out, to be a light of the world, to be a city on a hill. Spending time hearing God's voice as he guides us and tells us what our piece of that vision is. Because each one of us only has a small part of that vision, but it's when we come together that we put those pieces together and we can see what God is doing. Go out this week, be in prayer, listen for God's voice, and look for the piece of that vision that God is giving to you as we seek to be that light for the world, the city on a hill, that spiritual heart of our community. And then as we come back together, we can join those pieces together and see more completely the plan that God has set in front of us. Let us do this work, most importantly, though, in the name of the one who came and made it all possible. Let us do this work in Christ's name. Amen.